Okay, we're live. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. Two Feathers Native American Family Service on the Reclaiming Healthy Masculinity panel. So we have a lot of powerful Native men from all around locally and from Alaska. And we just want to thank you all for joining us and taking the time out of your night to listen in with us. Just a few things. So we will be answering questions off the Facebook Live. If you put them in there, we will try to get to them at the end. We're going to work through and let everybody introduce themselves and just have a little bit back and forth about the talks, about reclaiming healthy masculinity here. My name's Keoki Burbank. A little bit about me. I'm from Wichpeck. I grew up in Wichpeck and Hoopa, California. I live out in McKinleyville, California now, where I work at Indian education at McKinleyville High School, and I also coach football. And I'm super happy to be joined by one of my stud football players, Meta Kuska. But also I'm married, have two beautiful daughters. One's 14 in high school, one's almost 6 months old. So I'm really excited to hear what you all have to say and to learn from you, as a lot of these questions are going to be things that I want to learn, that I'm working on myself, and I'm just really excited to hear from all of you and just see where this night takes us and learn. So we're going to start off with Charlie, and if you could go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Charlie Reed. Hello, how are you? I'm Charlie Reed. I come from the Hoopa Kadugirak people up here in Northern California alongside Klamath Trinity Watershed. Um, you know, I'm the fifth of six, grew up in a big family. Five of us are brothers, so, was kind of dealt the big task of kind of trying to break down that barrier of being, toxic, so I'm going to be learning alongside you all here today, and I take pride in kind of the effort that I put in personally to make sure that I'm aware of kind of some privileges that I have just being kind of a man, but also understanding that this is a learning process, and being open and aware is the best thing I could do for myself. And similar to Kyoki, I have a daughter, 8-month-old daughter, and so what better way to kind of reclaim healthy masculinity than to have her being my Miss Accountability. So I think that's just one of the reasons, and it sucks to say that that's one of the bigger reasons why, but I think I've been doing a lot of good work before then too. So a little bit about myself. So I'll go ahead and let you all introduce yourselves. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Charlie. We'll call on Meta next.
Ayuki Hukich. My name's Meta Kuska. I'm a Yurok tribal member and a Karuk and Tolowa descendant. I go to McKinleyville High School. I'm a sophomore, 16 years old. I'm also a Two Feathers youth. I've been doing a lot of work with them lately, just expanding my knowledge of what I need to be for my peoples and just expanding myself as a man, really stepping into my role in my community and my culture and just finding out who I am. Play football and do track and field for the high school. And I'm trying to go to college, hopefully in a science department, but not really sure yet. A lot of things that I need to learn too as a young kid, not only as a kid, but as a young man, before I step into adulthood, fatherhood, things like that later in my life. So, like Charlie said, I'm here to learn just as much as talk about this.
Thank you, Meta. Steven, can we have you go next?
How's it going, everybody? My name is Steven Cheney. I'm from Lower Brule, South Dakota, the Kuichasha Oyate. I'm Lakota. I'm out here living in the Wiyot territory here in Humboldt County. I'm just happy to be here with my fellow relatives here tonight and to be able to just participate in this conversation. Just try to represent myself and my family and our peoples in a positive way, and just talk about some of the good things that are going on and some of the hard things, and how we can work through those together as individuals and with support of our relatives. So I'm here tonight, and I'm just happy to be here with everybody. So thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Jeff, you're up next.
Yakui, Nick now, Jeff Guido. I'm Yurok tribal member and also Tolowa descent. Just really happy to be on here tonight. My profession, I'm a substance use disorder counselor, and I get to work with a lot of young men, some not so young, but to see that the images that a lot of young men try to live up to and those unhealthy views that they see in the world, and again, to see how that affects them, makes it a really important topic to be here tonight. And not only in my work, but growing up myself, I kind of fell into those same things, trying to live up to a certain image and being misguided and misdirected. And so it's just really an honor to be here with all you men, and look forward to having a good discussion tonight. And hopefully our talks can change our own lives and affect other young men while we're talking. So, walk loud.
Thank you, Jeff. Last but not least, Damon.
So night law, Outland along is hot, the good night law den, Stigi di Chenu Ejun, Elchina Sinanu Ejun, Ta Kunsiao Ejun, Sauda Get Ethanau Ejun, Nung Hashlang Stongs, Hinudika Ong, Eflanas Iskian Kaja di Gusi di Gualagam, Hadas Iskian Fingerau Ejun, Hik the Hundlai, Iskian Ki Huang Aonash Ejun, How Ganesh Chish. So my name is Dan Bellholter. My height name is Nung Hashlang Stongs, which means big enough to hold two souls. And when I say Hik the Hundlai, that means Heidelberg. It's the most southernest tip of Southeast Alaska. So I grew up down here, hunting, fishing, learning to practice my culture. I was very, very fortunate. My mother, she apprenticed our last 10 fluent speakers. She is a cultural bear, led our dance group for 25 years. So Meta, I understand what you're saying when there's a lot, when you have someone that's a very powerful matriarch to look up to and work towards being like. And the majority of my life, I was like trying to be like not like her, because by the time I was young, I watched her be like raise hell against fishing game. She fought for our sovereignty. She gave me an understanding of whose land it was. And like she said, she would tell me, she said, you don't let fishing game tell you when and when you can't hunt and fish on your land. This is your land. So she made me really understand like being proud of my roots, being proud of what it meant to protect my community. So that's what I've kind of like implemented into my work. I took off from Heidelberg, and I was very, very fortunate to play college basketball, played professional basketball. But in the meantime, I found what I was truly passionate about. And that was when I was like 19 years old. I did my first basketball camp back home. Eventually, it led to me doing camps all over Indian country, all through Canada. And to this day, I've facilitated, with thousands of young people. And it's what I'm passionate about. And how I got into kind of talking about the men's stuff was like 4 or 5 years ago when I retired from basketball. I started looking at my stuff, my trauma, and I realized I had a lot of work to do. So that's when I started going to communities, and I started asking questions like, do you guys have resources for Indigenous men? Nope. No one was talking about these things 4 or 5 years ago, and slowly but surely I was like started hearing about it here and there. But I saw where our communities were, as we all know, like a lot of men are just holding so much pain and holding so much hurt, and they don't know who to talk to or how to get it out or express it. So that's what this is like same thing as I'll go into communities and I'll hold a men's space, not to lead it or guide it, but to listen and learn. Because like we're all in this same place, like you've all said, we're all in the same place together. And like when we talk about reclaiming healthy masculinity, it hasn't been clearly defined for a lot of people, so we're like, we're all figuring it out. So yeah, so I'm excited to be here with all of you. I appreciate all of you sharing. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you very much, Dan, and thank you for sharing that. Excited to hear all of you, give us your wisdom and share with us today. We'll jump into our first question, and we'll start with you, Damon. To you, what does it mean to be a good man?
I would say showing up. That's the hardest thing. I feel like when I've spent time with men, I've played basketball for a very long time, and the hardest part for a man, because we're taught from the time we're young, is to be built off of ego. We have to be the best. We have to compete. We have to compete for girls. We have to compete in everything we do through sports. We're all taught that everything's about competition. So what do we do in the meantime? How do Black and Indigenous men bond? And I specifically say them because men of color, how do we bond? We tear each other down. We make fun of each other. We make fun of each other's clothes from the time we're young. And these are things that I started to see in my group, in my network. And then I started to see it in young boys. I'm saying, oh, okay, like, how are we, like, we don't know how to be good men in a sense because we haven't really been taught. We've been taught a lot of, like, toxic, and I hate using toxic masculinity because I feel like it puts masculinity in this place. Like, when you hear toxic masculinity, that's the only thing you equate masculinity to these days. It's just toxic masculinity. So when I think about being a good man, I think it's showing up, because the hardest thing to be a good, you have to be a good father. That's the biggest thing. A good man takes care of their children. I make sure I have a 7-year-old son. My 7-year-old son, I don't put my hands on him. I don't spank him. I let him work through his emotions. I give him the space to express his big emotions. And that's it. Patience, understanding, empathy. Like, that takes what a good man for me is being able to tap into both sides of being gentle, but also being protective. And when I've spent time in these spaces, like, what my biggest takeaway is just, like, masculinity or being a good man is just safe, like, safe. A man that's just safe. Like, if you know what I mean, if I could just sum up, if someone said one word, I would just, like, it's a big, huge, gigantic explanation and answer. But if I could just say, it would be safe. Because a safe man, the community knows that they're not going to harm anybody in the community. You know what I mean? And the community knows that when it gets down to it, that man is going to step up and try and protect the community. So that's what I'd say is safe. So that would be kind of my take.
Thank you so much. And Jeff, same question to you. What does it mean to be a good man?
Yeah, I like what Damon said. It's definitely consistency. It's what I see with young people is, a lot of times the men in their lives are not consistent. They're absent, or they're in and out, or they say they're going to do something and they don't. I think that's really important, whether it's with your kids, with your significant other, with your community, with ceremony. Ceremony is that way. When you're a good man in ceremony, you're consistent in who you are, not just during ceremony time, but you live that way. I think that's a good judge as Native people. If you do ceremony and you act a certain way, then let's act that way year round. I like what he said too, the humbleness. For a good man, you need to be a good leader. You need to be able to lead your family, but you also need to be humble enough too to be able to learn and see your faults and be able to accept, maybe some criticism once in a while, and be able to give up that lead sometimes. If you have some good, strong women, some good, strong people in your family, as men, sometimes we need to be humble enough to be able to step back and know when to move forward again and lead. And it's that give and take, and just making sure that we're balanced with our loved ones, even our little ones and our kids. I got grandkids, and sometimes they're my leaders. Being able to be humble enough to be able to step back and then know when to step forward. I think for me that's what being a good man is.
Great answer. Thank you very much. Stephen, to you, what does it mean to be a good man?
For me, I think it's what the last two have said. I think it's about knowing where we fit into our world, and that being like all of the relationships that we have. Besides myself and Meta, you guys are fathers, grandfathers, so you have your roles that you're accountable to your family. You have like a teaching position, right? And I look at myself like that as an uncle, right? Like, that's my role to a lot of my nieces and nephews out there, is to be a teacher, a leader. And likewise, I'm someone's nephew, someone's son, all of those things. So I look at it like what is my relationship to others, and how do I be a good man? Like, how do I be a good person to my family and to the people that, you know, I hold those relationships sacred to. So it's just, you know, acknowledging that it's a continuous work, and that as we age and go into different parts of our life, fatherhood, being a grandfather, like that role is going to change. You know, we're going to have a different responsibility to those people that are looking to us. You know, likewise as a partner, what am I going to do to be a good partner to you know, my wife? Like, how do I support her? Those kind of things. Like, being aware of those things is to me what it is. You know, being aware that you can make mistakes and that you can hurt people, but that you're also capable of showing kindness, compassion, respect, and love. And that journey starts internally, right? Starts with all of us, teaching ourselves that, being compassionate with ourselves. Like, I'm so happy to hear Damon talk about, you know, the way that he's raising his kid, you know, not laying his hands on him, those kind of things. Those are things that are like changing, you know. We're reclaiming like our roles and our purpose in this world. And I think for a lot of Native men, that role was cut. And so I think that's why we're here today, and we're talking about these things, is just trying to find a way that we fit into this world in with respect to ourselves and our relatives. So that's what it means to me, is just honoring those relationships, protecting them, and like Damon said, you know, being a safe space for people too, including your brothers, you know, other men, just providing a place where we can heal, where we can laugh, and all of those things. But it's ultimately all based in respect and accountability and compassion to ourselves and to others.
Thank you so much, Stephen. And next, we're going to have Meta with the same question. I think it's so important that we have, you know, a young man, a teenager who's still developing, just like we all are still developing. We're all still always growing and working on ourselves. But to see a person like Meta, who I coach in football, but I'm learning from him, is just, I'm just so proud of you and just really excited to hear what you have to say, Meta. But what does it mean to be a good man to you?
You know, coming off of everybody else's points, it's putting other people's hearts before yourself. You know, you have to take in consideration that people feel their own way about certain situations, and the way you go about things, the decisions you make in the daily. It's just, I notice a lot of young men nowadays are ahead of themselves more than they should be, and, you know, think too highly of themselves to where they're like, oh, you know, like, I'll put someone underneath me, or I'll just make this person feel like, you know, they're lesser than me, even though that's not, you know, obviously that's not what should be done. And young men and just men in general just have to make it a priority to be gentle and really thorough with the things they say and their actions, because, you know, like, it can affect someone for the rest of their life, you know, and generations even. Trauma is a thing. So it's just, you know, mostly about taking time to look at how you approach every situation. And, you know, like, fatherhood, you know, it's a situation that is hard for a lot of people, just because they're stuck in a bad spot, or, you know, they're not really ready. And you just kind of got to plan out your things. You know, you got to take time to think about everything that you do. And so that's what being a good man means to me.
Thank you, Meta. And then Charlie, will have you answer that same question. What does it mean to be a good man?
Yeah, all those answers are just really powerful and resonate with kind of what I was thinking before I heard all these great answers, as far as, like, you know, consistency of showing up and just being present. And I also think that it comes with a balance. You know, when I was given this question, I was like, well, I want to be like balanced with my approach. You know, I want to be, like they're saying, a safe space. I want to be like someone they could trust, someone that they could be around and know that like not just like they're safe, but like they could be vulnerable around me, like they could show raw emotions, because I think that's something that I didn't know at Metod's age. So for someone like Metod to be on this panel, it's like he's like ahead of my curve, so that's just great to see. But it's also like we could start that so much earlier, like we could start that when we have brand new baby. I think it starts as early as like you see a lot of baby clothes, and it's like there's just like a lot of, I don't know, sexualized kind of like little cutie pie, or like I don't know, or sweet little princess. It's like we're already kind of putting them in this like super hyper like sexualized society, and we don't have to do that. Like we could put a baby boy in a purple shirt. Like that shouldn't be a thing. Like, oh, it's, there's just so much genderization that I think is harmful. But getting back to like the original question, I think it just takes a well-balanced person to be strong, but also like vulnerable and empathetic and being approachable. Like I think a lot of the times when I'm reflecting back as a childhood, I just thought I was always afraid of men almost, I was like scared into being a good kid. Like I didn't want to mess up because I was afraid that I would be in trouble or I'd get a spanking, like those are things that taught me how to be the person I am. And it wasn't until later that I realized I gotta unlearn that. I gotta come at this with a different approach. And I don't want that. I don't want to pass that down. And so I think just having a balanced approach of strength and also empathy and forgiveness and understanding, I think is what I would consider a good man.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for those answers. We're going to go on to our second question and we're going to start with you this time, Charlie. What are some things you learned growing up that were toxic that you're trying to unlearn today?
I think something that all of us kind of spoke to is just that we can't express ourselves. Like we got to hide our deepest feelings because it's an attack point. It's like my brothers will make fun of me for crying. Like, what are you crying about? I'll give you a reason to cry. And so it's like a vulnerability and they're going to take advantage of it. And so I think that's something that I was taught at a very early age, to where now I'm like, if I'm being honest, I probably cry more than my wife, like I probably have a lot harder things to deal with than her. And that's another thing too. Toxic masculinity isn't just confined to men. It doesn't matter what identity you take on, like it could easily be within other folks as well. And I really liked what Damon was saying earlier as far as like toxic masculinity. Like I remember just not too long ago, it's like, what, like since I'm a man in a heteropatriarchal society, like I'm just screwed forever, like I was so defensive on any type of like comment, and it would just be masculinity. I'm like, what's so bad? Like, and so it's an ongoing process. Like I just continue to learn more about myself, and I think that's what I'm trying to make sure that I'm doing for others and for the next generation. And to see Meta on here is like one of the many accomplishments that I plan on keeping alive. And so I think unlearning unhealthy ways of coping, I constantly just would like put it away, and I don't need that. Like I'm just going to be good at sports and be good at school, and that's going to be what gets me through everything. And it's not very sustainable when you get out of the small pool. It's like you realize, man, I got to take care of myself a little better than I thought I was, because sports isn't going to be there forever, school's not going to be there forever, but like your body, mind, and spirit's going to be there forever. And so you got to take care of your priorities. So I think that's what I would say to unlearn.
Thank you. Meta, same question to you. What are some things you learned growing up that were toxic that you are trying to unlearn now?
Well, I feel like I'm still getting the gist of all the toxic in life because I'm still young. There's still a lot that I haven't really seen out in the world. But as a kid and, going to high school, I understand that a lot of people have egos, and they feel like they can put themselves above other people just the way they talk. For an example, it's just like I know some guys or some young men tend to like egg on, like, for example, a young girl who is not interested or is in a relationship and just isn't really trying to be his attention, and like they just keep going, and I just don't understand. Like, you feel so highly of yourself that you think that you can put someone down, continue to nag on them, and just stuff like that is just things I wish I unlearned in this life. People choose to be like that, and obviously I choose not to. And it's just, yeah, it's just egos. People think they're better than others, and it just doesn't work. Never will work. Yeah.
Thank you. Stephen, what are some things that you learned growing up that were toxic that you are trying to unlearn today?
I think, I think there's just there's so many things out there in terms of like the messaging that we receive. Yeah, and it doesn't ever end, right? I mean, like, this is a continuous, I think it's continuous work on these things, whether you're 16 or you're 30 or above. Like, this is a continuous work, and it's work that you hold yourself, as well as like your relatives can help you with. I think about, in terms of things I learned growing up, maybe a little bit of the like the putting people down and things like that. Sorry if you can hear my dog. He's protecting us. But yeah, that kind of like negative behavior, putting people down and all that. I also learned to deal with alcohol at a very young age, and just the effects that had on me and my relatives. And so I could say, like, for me, that's one thing that I definitely had to unlearn, is to just be that's not normal. For example, like, to you see as a young kid, like, it's so normalized that going out, partying, drinking, all of these things. And I would say, like, there's a certain point in my life that I learned that, that I don't need any of that, right? That doesn't serve me one bit. And I think that, like, life is hard enough without all of those other things weighing you down. And so, just I don't do that right anymore. Like, I'm completely sober and have been for 8 years. And it wasn't like it was a super huge problem for me or anything. It was just that it wasn't benefiting me. It wasn't benefiting my relatives. And if I want to start holding myself accountable as somebody who is invested in our youth, nephews, nieces, all of those, I need to start doing something different, right? And so that's definitely something that I've unlearned, so to speak, and just decided to switch it up. You know, I don't need it. It doesn't serve me, and I got other work that I got to get done. There's work that I have to do for myself and my relatives, and those are the things that I work towards. So, whether you're a young person or old, it's always just I think just being open to learning more, like this journey of that. Just that you're gonna make mistakes, and I think that self-deprecation that I had growing up, or that people can have because of, like, putting each other down and all that, had to unlearn that, and that doesn't serve me either. It's just being able to, like, if I make a mistake, to own the mistake, and to try to move forward in with the best foot forward. Just try to hold myself accountable to myself and others, to my relatives, and to those people that are going to come after me. So, my children, my grandchildren, all that. So just being able to take a real firm stance on those things and say, hey, I'm an imperfect being, and and that's okay. And now I'm gonna get through that and try to get through it in the most healthy way possible.
Thank you, Stephen. Jeff, what are some of the things that you learned while you're growing up that that were toxic that you're trying to unlearn now?
Man, I have a big old long list of things that I learned that were toxic growing up. I grew up early on in a home with a father who was addicted to heroin, alcohol, PTSD from Vietnam, very abusive. Luckily, we got away from that. But that was some of my first teachings as a young person, And then growing up with a single mom and a family of mostly females, I sought out on my own as a teenager to figure out what it is to be a man. And man, that list grew even longer every day, especially as Native males. As Native males, we're expected to be able to outdrink everybody. We're expected to be able to fight better than everybody, to earn what we thought was respect from everybody. All these things that, we're misled to believe is being a man. I fell into every list of those. And, fortunately for me, I didn't get to go straight from my adolescence to college and get a job. My road's been long to get back to where I am today. And, it's not impossible. But I want to say probably the most toxic thing that sums up all of it is that I thought learning how to be a man was something I learned from other men. And as I really thought about my life and try to make these changes, I realized that's not who I should be defining who I am as a man. It should be the women in my life. Women decide what they want in a partner, who they want as the father of their kids. And in our culture, our mothers and our aunties and our grandmothers are so important to us. All those people I had in my life already. And I should have been listening to them on what it is to be a man. And the most toxic thing I learned was that I was looking to other men to kind of measure where I'm at. And the measuring stick that we use in society, especially as Native males, is not a healthy one a lot of times, So I think that's probably my answer. The most toxic thing is trying to measure my masculinity by other men, when it should be looking to those women to define what it is to be a man. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Damon goes to you. What are some things you learned growing up that were toxic that you're trying to unlearn now?
Thank you guys for all sharing. Thank you, Jeff, for being so candid. Same, long list. That was the thing, is that because I kind of share the background. Like I said, I grew up in a town of 300 people. And if you're from Southeast Alaska, if you're from the Pacific Northwest, you've seen Haida art, and you'll know that Haida people were very, very proud people. We traveled up and down the Pacific Northwest, all the way to Hawaii, to New Zealand. We traveled all over the world. And what was very, very big in my community is basketball. And I've been all over Indian country, and in my community of 300 people, I could easily count 10 people in my lifetime who should have played college basketball. 300 people, and I know exactly what it looks like, So as time went on, I looked up to a lot of guys who are really, really good. And I was fortunate because I was in 5th, 6th grade playing in these open gyms with grown men. And where I come from, 6'5", 6'6", 6'4", 6'3", that's very common. We have big athletic people. So from the time I'm 5th, 6th grade, I'm getting balls thrown at my head. I'm getting cussed out. I'm getting all these ideas or these concepts of what it means to be an alpha male, right? Because that's what we're all taught to think, is we have to dominate every space that we're in. We have to dominate everything that we're in. That's relationships with women. That's our friend group. We have to be the one who's going to be the first one to go jump off the bridge. You have to be the first one who's going to jump off the rocks. Watch this. I'm going to do it first, because that's going to show that I'm the manliest. So my levels of packing that on was from the time I was a kid. I was looking around of okay, I'm not really seeing it, right? And kind of the same thing we were talking about the women. I was fortunate that my mother was very powerful, like I said, and I had a lot of very powerful aunties. And I saw what switched for me was I was good for a long time in a sense of connected to the culture and an understanding of we're a matrilineal society. And once I left is where the disconnect happened, because a lot of those aunties that were kind of guiding me and I was watching, they kind of went down different paths in a sense. So I didn't have that connection anymore. So then I go from, I'm a 14-year-old kid, I go to a boarding school on the other side of the state, And by sophomore year, I'm recognized as one of the best players in the state of Alaska. Junior year, I have 20 Division I offers. I have boxes and boxes of like, and I have no one guiding me. That's why I mentioned that is like, imagine being a 15, 16-year-old kid and everyone thinks you're the man, you know? And on top of that, I've been in survival mode my whole entire life. So now that everyone's taking care of me and looking out for me, this is nice. This is comfortable. Because when I'm a kid back home, domestic violence every night, you know what I mean? So I saw very, very toxic relationships. So that's why I talk about men, like as Indigenous men, as men, we're taught discipline through violence. You know what I mean? Like all the guys I grew up with, like we got beat. It wasn't a spanking, you know? And that's a lot of the men that we grew up with, but they'll never talk about it. You know, a lot of men that I grew up around were molested. They'll never talk about it. You know what I mean? And that's all over Indian country, because they talk about the statistics of women who have experienced violence and all those different things. Guarantee you this it's the same exact percentage for our men, but we're just not talking about it because we're taught to be tough. So that's what happened to me was I thought value, because my value is based off my size, my athleticism. As soon as I was 15, 16 years old, as soon as everyone saw that I was going to go get a full ride scholarship, I had value. Everyone wanted to be associated with me. What's that mean? Women. Like when people hear about like the athletic world and how toxic it is for women, that's real. So I'm 16, 17 years old. I'm 6'8", 230. You know, I look like I'm 19 years old. So things start getting easier and easier for me. So that's, again, I tell people, like, put yourself in my position. I'm 16, 17 years old, and things are coming easier and easier and easier. And I look around, there's no one to guide me. So of course I'm just gonna keep taking, you know what I mean? So like I'm still in the place of unpacking. I was fortunate though that when I got to college, I started I started doing my camps and everything. I got a good understanding of like slowly what my purpose was. So as I was discovering my purpose, I was like, okay, I have to show up for these kids. I have to learn how to be tender with all of these kids. And once I had my son when I was 23, like that really showed me how to be tender from the whole time I held my son, right? So as soon as I held my son, I'm like, okay, I understand what it like. You're scared as heck to drop your child, right? And I'm holding my child and my son, and I'm like, okay, like I understand what it means to be tender in a sense. I really understand what real love is. So from that point moving forward, I started unpacking the toxic abuse that I got as a man to a man, and I started being tender with my son. And as things have gone on, I'm still unpacking so many things. I would say the biggest thing that I learned that I've had to unpack was putting value on my body and putting value on women's bodies, and thinking that's the only type of meaningful exchange that men and women could have, if that makes sense. So I'm making sure like I'm practicing being good friends with women. You know what I mean? And like it's a difficult thing to do for a lot of men. So making sure I'm checking myself, which again, it's a difficult thing to do. So yeah, like that's the biggest thing about unpacking is knowing and identifying, acknowledging that men and women could just be friends and have loving relationships. I could love you as a woman, I could love you, but it doesn't mean we have to engage in anything. So like that's the biggest thing I think I've unpacked, and I'm still working my way through that, and that would be the biggest thing, because I don't know, it's a really, really powerful thing when you could kind of exchange like that. And like I said, it doesn't have to be a certain type of way.
Thank you, Damon. And I want to thank everybody, all of our listeners and people who are watching on Facebook Live. Please continue to post your questions in the chat there or in the comment section, and we'll try to get to them as much as we can. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump into a audience question right now. And for that, whoever wants to jump in on that on the panel, go ahead and feel free, and we could have a few people answer it, or all of us if we want. But this question comes from Michael LeBeau. What would you say is the best approach addressing toxic behavior when your friends or other men have exhibited it in front of you? And whoever wants to jump on that one.
I would say just be very, because that's a hard thing, and that's what I'm very fortunate is that I spent a lot of time in uncomfortable circumstances where I went against the grain. So I think that would be it. Is like you have to kind of be very uncomfortable and say, okay, I'm gonna be the one who's gonna step up and say something, because a lot of times guys are thinking the same thing as that whoever asked that question. We're like, it's all right here, and it's kind of all clicking for everyone. Everyone are like, should I say something? I would say just be the first one to say something, and you're going to slowly influence those around you.
Yeah, just be courageous on that. You know, they're going to be looking to you on those things too. You just lead the way, and if you know it's wrong, especially when it's like disrespecting, you know, a woman or anyone for that matter, is just correct it. You know, don't let it go unspoken, even if you know, that means like putting those relationships on a rocky ground or something. I don't know. You know, if you see something, you have to say something, and that's the only way that we're gonna get better about these things, is holding each other accountable and holding ourselves accountable.
Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah,
Anybody else want to?
Yeah, I'll add to that. Like, I think just being courageous, and like, you are who you surround yourself by. So you might as well just, try and teach someone, drop some knowledge on someone, because that's what I wish I would have been. I wish somebody would have done that for me a little bit earlier, of like, man, that's not cool. Like, why do you think that's cool? Like, just kind of call me out a little bit. Like, why do you think that's a good way to treat someone or to think about someone? Like, I would have been such a better person if it wasn't such a culture around it. Like, I feel like that's all I knew how to be a man, is to be, like we're saying, competitive, and like you're gonna be the focus in every space that you're in. Like, that's what I thought was successful. And so if someone was like, man, that's not cool, I don't know who told you that, then I would have been like, dang, like I would have at least reflected, like, dang, that's probably right. Like, who am I? And there's definitely moments where I'm like, who am I? But like, I didn't feel like I could be myself in certain spaces, because it was like a vulnerability that I knew would just get exposed. And I think in today's, if I was talking to like a young man myself right now, it's like, be who you are, and that'll magnetize people that will support you and love you unconditionally, not when you're good at something, not when you're at the top of the class, but like even at your lowest points, those people will still be there. And so that's what I would encourage folks to do, is just be who you are and let the world figure out how to accommodate you, because that's how you got to be in today's society.
I think it's especially tough for Meta's age, you know, and you know, all the youth that are around Meta's age. You guys should just know there's a bunch of us that will fully back and support you on those things, you know, on being courageous in that way.
And it's one of those things, nothing ever gets solved unless you take a couple hard steps towards your goal. Especially like if your friends are being, disrespectful and getting the head of themselves, not really talking the way they should. You got to be a leader in every aspect of life, and you always got to push to be the best. Like I said, nothing ever gets solved without a little bit of pushing back against you. So it's just one of those things.
Thank you.
I think really too is there's a couple of approaches as well as, it depends on the dynamic. Sometimes it does depend on the dynamic. If you're in a group setting of being, okay, if you have a relationship with somebody and you want to go say, okay, pull them aside just one-on-one, that could be, because we kind of talk about the call out culture and then the call in culture. And, as Indigenous people, we didn't call people out. So there's time and places where, if you have that relationship with the whole group, you know what I mean? Like where you're all really tight or whatever, that's a different dynamic where, you could say certain things, but sometimes, if you call someone out where it's like they're iffy with different people in the group. So I think it would just be the dynamic. And I think that's kind of as we start to pay attention to our friends' behaviors more and more, and the more I've learned about trauma and projection, I've seen my friends' tendencies, and it's given me a better understanding of how to interact with them. Or if I do need to call them in for something, I know how my approach needs to be, because they might be defensive for certain things where this other friend, they might not be as defensive. So I think that would be it too, is kind of really just start like listening to each other. That's the number one thing. If we just start listening to our friends, like not just when they say shitty things or bad things, but when they like might be you might see them angry for something, and you don't know how to quite understand that. Pay attention to that too, not just when they're saying bad things. I think that's a big piece, is that we have to pay attention to each other way more, and we have to acknowledge the things of how, like, why is this person so mad? Why are they projecting a certain way? Like, what's going on here?
Thank you. We're going to jump into the next question. Damon, we'll start with you. Who is a male role model that you look up to, and why?
A male role model I look up to, Robert Davidson. When I talk about like Haida art and everything, so Robert, he's pretty publicly recognized as the greatest artist in the Pacific Northwest as far as canoe, as far as he's dozens and dozens of totem poles. Back in 1970, him and his brother, they raised a totem pole after a 150-year hiatus of totem poles not being allowed on Haida Gwaii. And what he did during that process was him and his brother, they it was mandatory. He brought back the clan system. If you go to Haida Gwaii now, when you talk about culture, or talk about sovereignty, that community, man, like Haida everything everywhere. Haida museum, Haida cafe, totem poles in front of people's homes. People are practicing the culture. People know the culture. Kids know their Haida names. There's language in the school, and that's a big part of that is because of him. He was early 20s when him and his brother did that. There had been a totem pole raised in 150 years. Imagine being in your early 20s and being, let's go carve 2 totem poles, and we're going to bring the whole entire village together. We're going to have a gigantic celebration, and we're going to do our very, very best to follow all protocol. So, me and him have had really, really very candid conversations about his depressions and his very, very hard times. So to see the impact he's had on the culture and how humble he is, if you spend time with him, you wouldn't know he's one of the greatest alive. You wouldn't know all the things that he's done. You go to Vancouver, you go all over Vancouver in Canada, you'll see his art in every museum, every airport. And like I said, he's so humble, but he had to be humbled. You know what I mean? Like, that's the way, like we were talking about as being men, like you have to be humbled, because our egos always get ahead of us. And it's going to happen. It happens to all of us. Like, our egos will take over and something has to punch us in the face. So and not just him, but I admire all men who are able to navigate through the difficult times and who could find a way to be, like I said, to be gentle and be humble and be able to acknowledge, like, hey, I fell on my face. So he's somebody I really, really respect. And there's other men as well, but again, the men that I really cling to or admire are the men who are very dishonest, who are very humble, who have gone through a lot of difficult times, and they're willing to mentor and guide the next generation. Because that's what our people did, is we made a point, and that's with Robert. His time is extremely valuable, but I could call him up anytime because, one, he's my clan brother. 2, because he thinks highly of me, because I listen to him and I want him to be a mentor. So I think that's, for all the young boys and the men, is like, even us as men, like, we have to find mentors, because if we don't have mentors, we're going to have no way to really hold us accountable. We have to find peers, and men younger than us can be mentors. I have men that are younger than me I look to, like, man, this kid, he really knows some stuff. So, like, I think that's it, is like, when we kind of talk about just the men we look up to, men we could look up to, or men we think are role models, could be men of any age. And it's just us being humble enough to say, like, okay, just because you're younger than me doesn't mean I can't look up to you or I can't ask you for advice.
Thank you. Jeff, who is a male role model that you look up to, and why?
Man, it's a tough one. I don't know if I could think of like any one single person. Like right now, each and every one of you on here is a role model that I'm looking up to right now. I just have so many people that I look to for different things. I think it's important that we don't necessarily look right at one male to be our role model, because we're human beings, and we have our flaws, we have our defects, we have our strengths, we have our weaknesses. And I don't know if I can really pick one individual person. I know everybody on here right now, like I said, just being given and being brave, being courageous to talk about things that don't normally get talked about. To me, that's, you guys are all role models right now, and I'm learning from each and every one of you. But with that said, like I said, we all have our character defects because we're human, right? And so, you know, I can't really choose a person, and I would suggest that we don't really do that. You know, look to multiple people, and hopefully, as healthy men, begin to have these conversations, and we could be those role models. There could be more of us out there to be available to provide the different things for youth. You know, it's so important. We all have our assets, and like I said, we all have our flaws too. So I don't know. I can't really answer that one, but I guess that is my answer.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. That's actually, I'm taking notes, and this is like a question that I'm really excited about because I'm always trying to get new mentors or learn from new people. And so I'm like, and that's one of the things I love about this era. There's so much wrong with Facebook, but we're able to have this conversation with so many of you because of Facebook. I could probably go look up Robert Davidson on Facebook and try to like glean some knowledge from him. And I'm not going to take everything because I've never met the man from him, but I am going to hopefully be able to learn something from him that could make my life better, that I could pass around to those people around me. But I am like, I do agree with you what you're saying, Jeff. That is a great answer because I'm the same way. I have a lot of people, a lot of men that are really important in my life. Stephen, who is a male role model that you look up to and why?
Yeah, so many people, so many relatives, so many uncles, like she's that are just good teachers, you know. I'm lucky for that reason. In that, you know, I have a lot of uncles who have gone through so many crazy journeys that I can learn so much from them, you know, what through their hardships that they share, through the way that they conduct themselves now. Yeah, there's so much that I take away from all of my uncles out there because they're teachers, as well as you know, my father, he's a good teacher, um, and a lot of my brothers, you know, my chies out there, my older bros that are good teachers for me, and as well as my younger brothers. Um, all of those things, you know, and cousins. I'll just go down the list and name everybody, right? Just like all the ways that I interact with people, I learn something from them, and so I look up to them in that way. Like I look up to them in the way that they go through pain, adversity, and struggle, and the way that they're still here. You know, because we're all doing that, and we're all making it. You know, and we're supporting one another in that. So, you know, specifically, you know, my Lexi Richard, I learn a lot from him. Uh, my Lexi David and Peter, all good teachers, contributing different things to my life. You know, different takeaways, and I'll always remember everything that they tell me, and I'll try to apply it in the way that I can. Now, one of my cousins in particular, I look up to him a lot. We're the same. Oh, he's 1 year younger than me, and we talk about all of the things that we're talking about today, right now, just on how we be good for our relatives, how we be there when they need us. Talk about all sorts of things, and outside of that, you know, I can, yeah, you guys on here, and I could probably just find just about anybody after talking to them, and find something that they can teach me and that I can learn from them, and so forth. So there's so many positive role models out there. Um, and all we have to do is start uplifting those things, you know. There's a lot of media and things like that that show us only one way, you know, like the drunk Indian or whatever, like all those things that exist out there that were meant to bring us down. You know, we're all breaking and changing those things right now, each and every day. We're reclaiming, you know, what it is to be a man, what it is to be an uncle, a father, a brother, a relative. And so you know, I can go on, and it's really the simple point is that just looking up to everybody in terms of like how we can take care of one another. And I'm thankful that I have uncles that can fulfill that role for me and provide that teaching and learning and love and compassion. Um, always through the journey and the experience, and just being able to share those things with people that surround us to be able to grow.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for sharing. Meta, who is a male role model that you look up to and why?
You know, there's a lot of male role models in my life, like everybody else is saying, you know, grandparents, uncles, you know, cousins. There's a lot of different people that you can take knowledge from and incorporate the best aspects of what they tell you into your life and to be your best self. One person, you know, that isn't really in my life physically, but who I look up to is Darren Waller. Um, you know, he struggled with opioid addiction at the earliest of 15. You know, I just turned 16. He's my age. He's addicted to all types of stuff, you know, throughout his entire high school, college, and up until his first 2 years in the pros. Um, and, you know, it took over him and he almost couldn't finish his career. And, you know, he almost lost hope, but he found that fire to be better than the addiction, to be his best self and to chase his goals and his dreams. And you know, he's found his success these last 2 seasons, earning himself Pro Bowls, and um, holds the Raiders reception record. He just broke this last year, and to me, that's one of the um, better male role models that's not in my life that I can say that I've been inspired by, you know, and that no matter what your demons are in life, that you can get over them and you can achieve all things that you've ever dreamed of. You know, they're not just dreams, they can become reality. So, Darren Waller.
Thank you, Meta. Charlie, who is a male role model that you look up to and why?
Yeah, I'm probably gonna. This is a hard one, you know. I really like Jeff's, you know, honest answer. Like, can't pick just one. But you know, for the sake of the conversation, I wouldn't be the person I am without my dad. You know, he's been a prominent role in my life, gratefully. But I also want to recognize that he was raised by a single mother, you know, so that's always plays a big role in that. And it kind of speaks to what Jeff was alluding to too, as far as like I look to a lot more Native women, I feel like, for the strength, for the compassion, for the honesty, love, trust, you know, all the things that kind of make me what I would consider healthy. And so a male role model, I guess, of course, I've got some of those, you know, my brother, some folks I listen to, look up to, but I always use them as like a shield, or like playing football, you know, your lead blocker, like, dang, he went that way, got smashed. I'm not going that way. You know, cut back this way. And so in a way, like, it put me on this path where process of elimination, using my siblings, you know, being fifth to sixth, I had a lot of lead blockers to get me to the end zone, you know? And so I just want to pay recognition and honor the folks who laid down the foundation for my family that I haven't even, who have played like a short time in my life. You know, my grandma Vera passed away when I was really young, and I just knew she's such a strong and powerful woman, and really made my dad the person he is. And I know for my mom, you know, her dad played a big role in her life. And so just that balance of having both male and female role models is really what I would say is who I look up to, and to stem away from, you know, the binary kind of way of considering role models. I think just anyone who's going to shed positive light on your life is who I really consider. And like we're all saying too, everyone in this space right now is who I look up to. Like Meta, like he's a young man in these spaces, like as a sponge, you know, at an age where the whole sky is the limit, like for real. And so that's who I look up to. Like they give me hope. The next generation gives me a lot of hope that I probably wouldn't have if it was a different reality. So that's a really good question. And I just think we could talk about that the rest of the hour, you know? So I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Charlie. And then we're going to go to the fourth question. And then after this, we're going to really start hitting the chat questions. So, are the comment questions in Facebook Live. So start sharing them in there for everybody who's following along. But Charlie, if you were able to speak to your younger self today, what advice would you give?
Dang. Don't be a fool. Be understanding, empathetic, and take some serious looks in the mirror. Like, who are you? Be proud of it. Be open about it. Uplift others. Man, I could sit here and just talk all day about this because there's so many moments where I'm like, man, I could have been better about that. And so just constantly knowing that there's so much more that I could have been doing to work on myself rather than kind of meeting other people's expectations or trying to fulfill or satisfy other people who aren't even in my life right now. Really, like I was caring about other people's opinions who played such a small role in my life, like and just treating my family. I could have been really learning about my culture, my family, but here I was just worried about what my friends were doing, and I got to be at my friends because I'm afraid I'm gonna miss out on some conversation on Monday, like dumb stuff, instead of sitting down with some elders who aren't with me anymore. Like, just I wish I appreciated my elders a little more growing up. So that's how I'll end that question.
Thank you very much. Medtal, will go to you. And since you're still a young man, maybe you could answer it as like what advice you'd give to your little brother, right? So if you were to speak to your younger self today, what advice would you give? Or if it hits more for you, what advice would you want to pass to your younger brother?
Like you said, I'm still young, still got a long life ahead of me. Some advice that I'd give to myself or someone my brother's age is just focus on yourself more than anything. Focus on achieving your goals and setting them high. The little things at the end of the day, they don't matter, and they just get in the way of yourself and just create chaos. I know one thing I've struggled with is overthinking a lot, even just little situations. And I wish that never started. I wish it was just more of a, it's okay, brush it off, you got this, one day at a time. And I'm slowly starting to get in the groove of taking things one day at a time, especially without football, stuck at home a lot. It's hard to have my outlets like I'm used to. So I guess I'd just say, focus on your heart, focus on how you feel and focus on your self-being, you being okay. Because if you aren't okay at a young age, then it's just going to be downhill from there. Can't start off rough. You got to start off strong. So.
Thank you, Meta. Stephen, if you were to speak to your younger self today, what advice would you give?
Be strong. It's gonna be a long journey to get to where you end up. Be strong, and I think that's the whole point of today too, is redefining what that strength looks like internally for each of us, and that you're gonna make it. Um, Sometimes I think when I was Meta's age, man, it just seemed like a lifetime away to be someone my age, and how quickly that goes, and how much struggle you're gonna go through. Like, you're gonna go through a lot and things that you never anticipated. So be strong. You have this, and be compassionate too towards yourself, because throughout all of that, that's the one thing that's really gonna hold you down, is learning how to be that way. to be compassionate towards yourself and to be able to forgive yourself for those things, so you can get back on track and focused on, you know, what you're here for. And you know, for me specifically too, it would just do that you know, you can accomplish anything that you want to. Seriously, like I've been able to do things that I would have never even dreamed of, and it all come down to that discipline of the mind, and figuring that out, whatever that discipline meant for me. You know, however I was able to learn to maintain that focus. You know, maintain that focus, and you got it. That's what it's gonna be okay. You know, no one said it's gonna be easy, but be strong and you'll be all right. And we'll make it. Yeah, you know, I think like it's just simple, but it's powerful. You know, your Meta's age, or your Jeff's age. You know, we're gonna be all right, but we have to really stay focused and take care of ourselves, and for our relatives too. And not just like as a metaphor, the relatives, like the people that are accountable to you. Think about, you know, your children and what they mean to you, and what you got to be, how you got to be even today physically for them as a grandfather. You know, do you want to be somebody that they have to take care of? You know, you want to be strong, like physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, to just to just be. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. And so yeah, it's gonna be all right. That's my message to my younger self. It's gonna be okay, and you got this.
Thank you, Stephen. Jeff, if you could speak to your younger self today, what advice would you give?
Yeah, I guess it would depend. You know, the message would be different depending on which age of the younger self. Younger for me could be, you know, mid-30s. But I guess if I'm talking to like the young me, I would tell myself not to be afraid to talk about how, you know, my father's addiction, the abuse, growing up with a single parent with a limited amount of role models. Don't be afraid to speak up and talk about how that was affecting me, you know. I would tell them not to hold that in, because it's going to come out, and it's going to come out in a negative way. That's probably the toughest thing. But I also would say, you know, I always think about this, and I always talk about how I grew up in a predominantly female family, which is true, you know, it is pretty predominantly female, but there were males around. But I didn't talk about what was going on with me. I didn't reach out to those men in my life until we get better as a whole and recognizing that in the young people in our lives. You know, I would tell that young person to speak up and to say, I need some time with you. I need somebody to take me out and, you know, play football, go fishing, whatever it is. Speak up and tell people that you need them in your life, and not to be afraid to say that, you know. I guess to the teenager me, I would just say to be courageous enough to just be who you are. Don't try to impress people. Just find what makes you happy and be happy doing that, no matter what anybody else thinks. You know, if you're doing something good, you're doing something right, have that courage. I liked that question earlier, you know, about what should you do if you see people doing something wrong? And, you know, chances are those other people are doing those bad behaviors because they're just as insecure. They're hiding just as much pain. And I would tell that younger me to be that leader, be that one to stand up and say, no, we're not doing this. This isn't right. And to be okay to walk away and be by myself if I need to, you know, be okay with a small circle of friends. You know, that's what gets me by today. You know, I have a fairly small circle of people I interact with, and, you know, it's a healthy circle, and I'm okay with that, you know. So that's what I would tell my younger person.
Thank you, Jeff. And then Damon, ask you the same question. If you're able to speak to your younger self today, what advice would you give?
I thought about that in the past. I would tell myself to forgive my parents, to forgive, I mean, at an earlier age, because I'm fortunate I've gotten to a place where I've forgiven my parents. I've forgiven a lot of people that have hurt me through my journey, which is like the biggest thing that we hold on to is anger. And we see that's like what projects onto is like so many of all of our actions are based off of us being hurt pretty much. And until we acknowledge the why. So I would say to, forgive my parents, forgive myself, be patient with myself, and I would say be a little bit more humble throughout the journey, because like in my high school, when I was in high school, when I was 16, 17, I had a gigantic chip on my shoulder, and that like created this like alpha male hardened shell that I didn't really start breaking out of until I had my son. So up until I had my son, like I was a complete alpha through high school, through college, because I had to be, in the sense the higher I climbed, I had to be, because you step into spaces where everyone's big, everyone's strong, everyone's athletic. The best, when you step into a room where you're playing against the best players in the world, essentially, you have to adopt so many like alpha characteristics. So I would tell myself to be strong, be courageous in those spaces, but biggest thing is be patient. But I wouldn't change the alpha mentality I adopted of competition, but I would change how it spilled over into my everyday life, because it's required in competition, which we all had as Indigenous men. When we went into competition, we went into battle, we turned on something. And when we stepped out of battle, we turned that off. We left that on competition. We left that at battle, because that's what we all need it. You know what I mean? That's why we had competition before, is because as men, we need somewhere to compete. So I would say that is don't let myself spill that competitive nature and that alpha mentality over into my everyday life, but keep it in battle, keep it where it needs to be.
Thank you, Damon, and thank you to everyone on this panel for answering those questions. We're gonna jump into the listener questions now, and then we just do it. Jump in whenever you have an answer, or you want to share some thoughts on whatever the topic might be or the question. So the first one comes from Lou Hill. She asks, what advice can you give a single mom who are trying to raise healthy young men without fathers in their lives?
I'll take that one. Luckily, my mom and I, we've been through it in similar ways, and I have a lot of aunties that I've seen see do it, sisters that do it, all of those things. And my advice is just to if you need help as a relative, just let someone know. Try to go to those supports that you have that are healthy, those whether it's male or female, and just and draw from them, and that you're doing great. That would be my advice too, to this single mom, is that you're doing wonderful, and you're not alone, is my point. You have support. Just reach out and let someone know, and you'll have all kinds of positive people to help you raise that child.
I would say key. I mean, if culture is accessible, obviously, it's a great place for a young boy to develop. But I know a lot of co-parents. I would say the biggest thing, if you have any ill feelings towards your child, your boys' father, I would make sure you don't let that pour into your relationship with your young boys, because that's a big thing that I've heard a lot of time, is that a woman, and this isn't just a woman, this is all relationships, all co-parenting relationships. And myself, I have a solid co-parenting relationship with my mother, because I unpack the ego, and I've made sure that we communicate on the same level. Even though we may not see eye to eye on a lot of things, we are able to like find ways to mesh so that he could see us connecting. So I think that would be the biggest thing for men and women raising children or co-parenting, is making sure you're respecting their father as their father. You don't have to respect him as your partner. but you do have to respect them as their father, because it's their opportunity and it's their responsibility to identify how they want to participate in the relationship with their father. And that's everybody. Is like, we as parents, we shouldn't try and control our children's ideas, our concepts of their parents. We have to let them decide how they want to participate. So that's what I would really say is, and that's not just for single mother and fathers, whatever the case may be, making sure that you're just being the best you and you're not competing with the other side, just being the best you, showing up. If there's accessible culture, if there's accessible uncles, because, you know, a lot of our cultures, the uncles raise the young men. You know, we went to men's house when we were 9 years old in a lot of different cultures, you know, and we started to become men. We were in war. Like, a lot of our elders, a lot of our grandparents, guaranteed, like, we all had grandparents who are 13, 14 years old joining the war. Like, imagine, like, we're talking about like becoming men. They had no choice whether it was time to be men. It was like, I remember my Uncle Chuck, he was a Green Beret, he said the same thing. He's like, we as Haidas, we didn't join the army because we wanted to fight for the United States. We joined the army because that's what Haidas do. We go and fight, we protect. And they just felt called to do it. So I just look at that. Yeah, it's a side thing, but I think that's it. Is really just making sure that we're lifting up both sides of the co-parenting relationship. And if the person's not involved, making sure that you're just being the best you.
Yeah, I just really want to echo what Damon and Stephen had just said. You know, I think Stephen started off great and powerful as far as like, you're not alone. You're doing a wonderful job. And also just knowing that your actions are going to speak a lot louder than your words or advice could ever. I mean, important to communicate for sure, but at the end of the day, like, they're looking to you to handle certain circumstances, and just to trust that what you're, as long as you have a good heart, clear mind, you know, vision, I think that's all you need. And just not being afraid to ask for help. I know that that's something that I struggle with in my own life. And I know that's a lot different for a lot of different people, but just knowing that there's people there to help you and care about you, and you may not even know it. So just trusting that you can do that sometimes. Not all the time, maybe, but sometimes it's all right. So that's what I'll just say, is echo the folks before me, what they had said. That's a powerful message.
Thank you. The next question we have is from CL Garcia, and it says, what are your thoughts on the place for and the role of two-spirit people in the process of reclaiming healthy masculinity?
Can you ask that question again?
Sure. What are your thoughts on the place for and role of two-spirit people in the process of reclaiming healthy masculinity?
So what I've seen in the spaces I've been into, the different conferences that I've seen, right, from I've seen there's been 3 houses at these big conferences I've been to. There's 3 houses I've seen in a couple of different spaces. There's been 3 houses of people who identify as man, woman, and then non-binary, two-spirited, and they're also given the choice of where they want to go. So I think that would be it, because I remember being a boy, and like, as you know, as Indigenous men and boys, you know, we're taught to throw out homophobic slurs like it's our job, you know. And when I was a kid, my mom heard me one time, and she got so angry with me, and it wasn't she's just cussed at me and said whatever. It was, she sat me down and she said, "This is how we integrated everybody into relationship. There was no gender roles." So I think the role is kind of, because like as boys, that's why it's difficult, and that's how this conversation a lot is like, a lot of the people in our communities, boys and men, aren't necessarily ready for this conversation until we get to a certain point. You know what I mean? Like, we can't just, and I've seen it. I've seen it. I've seen spaces where you've seen men get uncomfortable when there's someone who identifies as two-spirited or gay, whatever the case is. They get visibly uncomfortable. It's because it's not normalized. So I think that's it, is that we have to find ways to start normalizing the integration of people coming together and start slowly talking about these conversations. And if we could gather boys who, you know, young boys who could start navigating through this homophobia that's ingrained in us, then we can start hosting these conversations. So I think the first point is having the conversations young, and then slowly but surely, because if we have a bunch of men who haven't even had these conversations, we're just trying to throw this at them, it's going to be difficult. It's like, it's steps, just like we're all unpacking and we're learning. Like, there's a lot of learning that has to happen. So I think the biggest step is we have to start educating our boys and start finding ways to help our boys navigate through this homophobic tendencies that are taught young.
And the whole, and I think it's just understood, but just that I look at that, and it just has to be everything grounded in respect, nothing else but respect. That's how we can have those conversations, and it's getting through all those things that Damon highlighted. But it's just we need to respect ourselves and others in that, and we can talk through any of those things, in terms of a two-spirit person's role and what it means to be masculine. And I think throughout our conversation today, we've also defined or broken away from like that traditional definition of what it means to be masculine. And I think it's involved in it. You get to those kind of conversations through things like this, and not just by listening to a webinar or things like that, but exactly like Damon said, having the conversations at home with our friends, with our relatives, and just making it happen, and creating a respectful place for people to just be themselves, and to come into their identity, whatever that is.
Thank you both. I really like those words. I think the answer that I had in my mind is just that those folks are the bridge of the past to the future, and I think that that's essentially what it can be like. And again, like what Damon was saying, it's like unlearning so much of this homophobia and having that planted so early that it's not so hard of a conversation to have. It's being normalized, and that bridge is being built from the past to the present and to the future, because that's been my whole journey, is just bridging and like kind of filling in gaps that have been intentionally taken from us, because it was just people seeing how powerful that was for folks to be able to do a little bit of everything, and they just thought that was bizarre. That wasn't their culture. Like when I say they, I mean like colonialism, like all the folks who kind of came and hurt our people intentionally. And I think we have our community is very capable of building a bridge to a brighter future, and that includes everyone, however you identify. We never pushed anyone away. Everyone was welcome, especially with the people who have good heart, good intentions. So I'd say that they have a vital role in our future in reclaiming healthy communities.
Thank you all. Next question comes from Michael LeBeau. What would you say is the best approach addressing? Oh, sorry, I already asked that one. Chance Carpenter asked if you could define projection for us.
I think it's just tendencies. It's tendencies. So when we talk about like the toxic masculinity thing, same thing. You hear it, and when you hear toxic masculinity, you immediately get defensive. You know what I mean? Because we're programmed to think masculinity is a certain thing. So when we start getting challenged to think differently, then we're immediately defensive. So I think it would be being defensive. And there's sometimes where you'll feel certain ways, or you'll shut down, and you'll get angry for small little reasons, or you'll get triggered by a family member. Like me and my mother, me and her have a hard time communicating because we're very, very much alike. Again, she was apprentice our last time, fluent speakers, leader of the dance group for 25 years. She wrote $1 million grants, and she accomplished a lot of things. And I learned that me and her couldn't communicate because she was projecting onto me. And she was having a hard time that I was stepping into my identity as a basketball player, as a community leader, because at first I was just a basketball player. Slowly but surely, I started to become somebody. I started teaching Haida language. I started getting back, into the culture. Once I had opportunity to step away from basketball, I started, teaching and doing all those things I had time for. So projection comes in so many ways, myself included. I see so many different ways that I will project as well. So I think that's, my ways of projecting, like I said, are shutting down sometimes when I feel myself getting too vulnerable sometimes, and I have to check myself. You know what I mean? I shut people out. I know my ways of projecting. If I get in an argument with somebody or I have a disagreement, we might have a conversation for a bit, but then sometimes it's like, okay, whatever, I'm just not going to talk to you, and I'm good with it. I've learned my projection is being able to, because what did I do growing up? I was in survival mode. So I had to create all these big walls. So now it's like, if people start to penetrate those walls, it's like, oh, okay, this isn't, I don't know how I feel about this. Get out and stay out, and then I have to check myself with that and like learn to be like a little bit kinder with people, in a sense of knowing when they're triggering me or when I'm triggering them. So there's a lot of different type of projection. Like basically every every toxic thing we do is a type of projection. You know what I mean? Like being negative. There's so many ways of projection, but we all project in different ways.
All right, thank you, Damon. Next question comes from David Arwood II. I'm curious about your thoughts on how trauma and resulting addiction contributes to toxic masculinity.
I can feel that one to my cousin. That's pretty cool to see him tuning in. I think that you can't have these conversations without talking about, intergenerational trauma. I guess alluding to earlier, any type of difference in the settler colonialism's perspective is a target, and I think that starts from boarding school, but even before that, like genocide, enslavement, all the things, and how that trickles down till now, where we're taught to be the strong, like to lift the most weights, or to be the fastest, to be the strongest, to be superior, because those teachings were taught to our great grandfathers to be strong, and so in boarding school that just taught so much unhealthy like ways of parenting and like kind of coping, that now that eventually leads to like, I could drink the most beer I could drink. And I think Jeff and others had said that, like, you're now like in competition when you're obviously all are going through something that you're not talking about, you're just hiding and covering. And so when you're addicted to alcohol, you're addicted to even sugar, like there's so many different variations of what addiction could be, but in the context of drug addiction, you're suddenly now probably competing with like who has the most or who can do the most, and who, so I think there's a lot there, and I'm sure Jeff has a lot more, explicit kind of pinpoint an answer to that. But I just want to say that you can't have these conversations without recognizing the historical implications of it all.
Yeah, I think, they definitely go hand in hand. I talked about myself, my traumas of growing up, and, me being the one that has to be the last one up drinking when I was young. I had to outdo everybody. Couldn't be the first one to hit the ground, but beyond that, I think we all, when we were asked at the beginning, what makes a good man, being present and being consistent was, on the top of most of our lists. And when you're medicating your traumas with some kind of addiction, it becomes a very selfish thing, and you're not there for anybody. You would think that having a family, having kids would be enough to change your mind and give up that addiction, but it doesn't work that way. And so for me, I think, it definitely goes hand in hand with toxic masculinity. And then we teach that to our younger people. A lot of us as males, like, has been talked about, different traumas have occurred. We medicate, and we teach that to the younger people. This is now what you do. You don't talk about things. If you're feeling a certain way, if you're, having thoughts you don't want to think about, this is what you do. And so we continue that cycle, just like keeps getting passed down intergeneration, one after another. So I mean, there's tons of ways that it definitely contributes, but definitely any kind of addiction is medicating some type of trauma, and we're teaching that to the young people, that you don't talk about it, you medicate it. And so
Yeah, and I think I also see those, like I think Charlie, for uplifting like that historical trauma and all this the trauma that can happen to us all individually, within the family and everything. And I think just to kind of add to the conversation, it's I guess like more of a solution to or approach back from those places is, incorporating and practicing and living our cultural ways, if they're available to us, to be able to take care of those traumas that we're dealing with, to reclaim who we are as people, as men, as relatives, and all of that. I mentioned earlier, like, I don't drink or anything like that because it doesn't serve me, and life is hard enough, right? It's so hard. It's also so beautiful, but there are so many things that are tough, and those things are not serving us. And we were separated from being able to take care of ourselves as men, and a lot of us, right? And in a lot of the things that we have, specifically in my culture, Lakota culture, also around the women, is focused on, a lot of the things that we have as men is focused on taking care of that trauma, on being able to get rid of those things that are no longer serving us. um we're in my language, we're unshika, we're pitiful. We don't have the same sacred capability to take care of ourselves as women do. And I think that right there, not being able to, being separated from our culture, really contributes to that, whatever you want to call it, toxic masculinity, that trauma and so forth. So it's really, as men, owning and trying to get connected back to, if possible, our language, our culture, our practices of taking care of ourselves, that daily practice. And that it's an ongoing thing, whether your life is feeling really good right now, or if it's really tough, it's being able to acknowledge that it's an ongoing process, and not acknowledging that, and not being able to identify or work through those addictions, and it never solves the issue, and it just stays there. We're not able to let go of it, and it's just like that big old pile of clothes in the room that you need to take care of. We need to do that, right? We need to, like, work on those things. And I think that our cultural ways are ways of, that we're taught, that we're handed down to us, of, especially as men, of being able to take care of those issues. We need to go to them.
You said,
Thank you.
what was the question again?
Um, thoughts
Go ahead.
on trauma and resulting addiction contributes to toxic masculinity.
Yeah, and I like what Charlie said, because that's kind of what I try to highlight, is that, all my great uncles went to residential school, and when they did a study, they said that 7 out of 10 men who went to residential school was sexually abused or molested. So if we look at that from the intergenerational part, like, again, like, how were we taught discipline through violence? How were our great how are all of our ancestors taught discipline through violence from the colonizers? So we haven't, like, that just carried on and on and on. And how do we start dealing with the pain? Drinking together. So, like, you get a group full of Native men, and we're all sober. How many times are you gonna hear a bunch of Native men saying that I love you? You get us all drunk. You can't get your bro to shut up. You know what I mean? I love you, bro. I love you. You're going to hear all these men throwing around love, hugging each other. But when they're sober, they're not doing that. So, like, all of it, from not being, you know what I mean? Like, if we're not drunk and we're not, drinking or under a substance, we can't be lovey with each other. We can't show compassion. We can't be affectionate with other men until we're under a substance. Same thing with women. You know what I mean? If you get a bunch of drunk guys and you get women around, then we start getting all, crossing boundaries and getting aggressive. Same thing with when we're in at a party. Like, you'll have a bunch of drunk men. Like, there's a good chance there's going to be a fight. You know what I mean? Everything all comes from substances, but at the same time, hurt people hurt people. So if I want to fight you, it's because I don't like myself. I don't love myself. You know what I mean? If I hurt a woman, it's because I don't love myself. If I'm willing to like get a little drunk and go jump into a bed with a woman, you know, which I'm at that fault. You know, if that means that there's pieces of me that I haven't discovered, that why am I doing that? It's because I don't love pieces of me enough to not do that. You know what I mean? So I think that's the biggest thing, is that there's pieces of us that we don't love, that, ooh, when I drink, I get brave and tough because I'm not really tough. You know what I mean? When I drink, I become the ladies' man because I'm very insecure. Like, you see, every substance all ties into the toxic masculinity, because it's either a band-aid or it's this boost of ego confidence that we don't need.
Thank you. Next question is, how do you think shame compounds toxic masculinity? Comes from David Sunners Hostler. How do you think shame compounds toxic masculinity?
I think it compounds that, just going off of what I just said, in that you're not dealing with whatever it is, you know, or we're not, you know, being compassionate to ourselves. You know, it doesn't go anywhere. It just sits there in your mind, in your body, and you know, that shame have a physical impact on your body, just like what Damon has been mentioning throughout this conversation, of including like sexual violence against men, that molestation and things like that. Like those sort of things can have impacts on the stress levels and everything throughout a whole entire lifetime, because they're not able to let it go, like to be able to address it. It's not like letting it go, but you know, to be able to have a way to heal that, so to speak. And exactly that, you know, it doesn't go anywhere. And it's something too, in that, like, if we're not taught to let go of that shame, we're the only people ourselves the only person that can let go of that shame. Even if, like, I'm telling you, hey, Charlie, you don't need to be ashamed of anything, or, you know, I'm there, I'm supporting you. Unless Charlie wants to forgive himself for those things, it's always going to be there. And so that internalizing that, just that's how it compounds all of those negative things, those things that aren't serving us and benefiting us. You know, be compassionate to yourself. I think that's the one thing that I want to uplift the most around these things, whatever age you are, is be compassionate to yourself. And you know, it won't be easy, but you'll get through it, right? And that's a message that I just want to uplift so much, especially when it comes to feeling that shame.
I don't have anything else to add. I mean, I just want to, I guess, put on my own twist on it. It's like, if you're put into a corner for, you know, a laundry list of reasons why, you might as, like, I just can see folks just being like, well, screw it, F it, you know, like, you're gonna think I'm this monster, like, I'll be that monster, I'll show you. And that's not good. Like, putting anyone in the corner isn't the most effective approach to help someone. I mean, I get it, like, there's a lot of pain and hurt that kind of go into play, and, you know, getting fed up, like, all you can, and it kind of comes back to what Damon was saying earlier. It's like, you're going to call them out or you're going to call them in. Like, there's a time and place for everything. And sometimes as humans, we don't always know when that time and place is. And so sometimes you just do it, especially when you're talking about how a lot of emotions for men don't come until they're under some type of substance. And that's when you're really in a corner and you're really going uphill and against the grain. And that's when there is no lines, you know, it's really unhealthy. And so I guess that's how I would put my little twist on what Damon and Steven had already said.
Thank you. You know, I was just kind of reflecting a little bit on our conversation tonight. And so, you know, one of the questions is like, what advice would you give to yourself when you're younger? and I'll probably give myself this advice even right now, but just like to have these conversations more. I've had very few of these conversations. I think I'm growing, but I know like I have a long way to go still. So I'm glad we're having these conversations. I think we need to have it more because it's not in, you know, the dominant society or the dominant culture to think this way. It's not what's being portrayed on the media. You know, that's not what we see bombarded with us all the time. It's actually the exact opposite of what we're talking about tonight. So it'd just be like, rewatch this, you know, share this out with people, this talk tonight, have these conversations more. But I just, you know, I wanted to thank all of you tonight, and we're just going to kind of finish up with, you know, your final thoughts or like whatever your last message you'd like to say, or, you know, maybe where somebody, a young man wants to talk about these things, or maybe it's any man wants to do it. If there's a spot they could reach out to you at, and just continue to carry these conversations and get answers and bounce ideas off each other. So, Stephen, if we could start with you.
Yeah, thank you, Kyoki. So glad to be here with everybody. I was a little nervous that for sure coming into this because it's just it's a heavy, large topic. Not it's heavy, but large, and there's so many directions that we can go with it. You know, just to uplift the amount of work that it takes to get through some of the pressures, the traumas, and everything. It's a lot of work, and for those people that are just beginning that journey, you know, just know that you're not alone. That it's continuous work, especially for people that are struggling with addictions. You know, I just want to let you know, you're not alone. You know, you got your relatives here, and reach out to them. You know, it's hard being alone and carrying those things, and so I just think that you guys should be proud of yourselves for making it this far for sure, and to reach out to the people that you trust. And if you're not sure who those folks are, you know, go to places like Two Feathers, or you know, or people like Damon that are really like showing us how we can be healthy. There's so many resources out there for this, and so, you know, it's hard doing it alone, but you don't have to. And you know, I'm always here too. If you guys ever want to talk about anything, any of these things, I'm just here to listen. Any of my relatives, you know, reach out to me, and I'll try to be there for you. I will be there for you if you need that somebody to listen to, and just to tell you that, you know, you are worth it, and you'll get through it, and to just be strong.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Jeff, can we have you go next?
Yeah, I just want to thank all you men real quick for, you know, you guys giving your time and be able to come and talk about these things. So I'm available for people to meet with me. I am a substance abuse counselor. I work for Trinidad Rancheria Social Services. My wife works for Two Feathers. Everybody at Two Feathers kind of knows who I am, how to get a hold of me. And I'm always willing to make time, you know, for young people struggling. I was thinking about that question a while ago about a single mother, you know, and the answer is that us men need to be able to step up and, you know, be able to be there for those single mothers, for those kids that maybe are coming from single parent homes. We need to step up and fill in those roles. You know, there's plenty of us around. And so we just need to be able to dedicate some of our time, some of our energy, and, you know, we end up finding out it's very rewarding. You know, I have a lot of young people in my life, you know, that I love and care about, and, you know, I pretty much consider them my kids. So it's it definitely feels good to be able to be there for them. But for all young people out there, you know, just like I said earlier, don't be afraid to reach out. Don't be afraid to say, hey, I need somebody in my life. I need somebody to talk to. It's okay. You know, we talked about how shame affects toxic masculinity, and shame's the glue to everything that comes out negative. Any kind of maladaptive behavior, shame is the glue that holds it together. And so once we get rid of that, especially as men, it's a hard thing to do. But don't be afraid to reach out and say, I'm struggling. I'm having a hard time. I need somebody to talk to. You know, they talked about what it is to be a man, and that's what it is to be a man. Be able to be humble and admit that we're struggling. So just thank you all, and don't be afraid to reach out, and appreciate your guys' time.
Thank you, Jeff. Meta, if you have any last thoughts or things you'd like to end on the night with.
I just want to say, how thankful I am to be able to expand my knowledge and to be able to share with you men today. And that, no matter how hard life may seem sometimes, Creator only pushes us so far. He's never going to push us past our limit. It's up to us to find that balance, take it one step at a time. And, there's always going to be challenges. There's always going to be steps that, feel like it's too far to take that step, or it's too hard, but you just always got to believe, you always got to keep pushing to be your best, no matter how hard life gets sometimes, and to be an influence on the people around you, the younger generations and the older generations. It's never too late to change someone's opinion, or to, change their heart. So just find that balance in life, Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Meta. Charlie, can you share with us you want to leave everybody with?
Yeah, I think everyone is doing a great job on just letting people know that we're here for them. I even went ahead and put my email address here if anyone needs anything, anything at all. But yeah, I just also want to take the time to thank each one of the panelists here today. I learned a lot from you all. It's honor and privilege of mine to be in the same space as you all. And so I hope you all have a wonderful evening, but even a wonderful life from here on out. And also want to say thank you to Two Feathers and the folks who made this possible. I haven't seen a lot of opportunities to even be in a space like this. So I think that's a big step in the right direction, and just really want to encourage other agencies, organizations, groups, platforms in general, just to start talking about this, like normalizing these conversations, giving young men, a lot of opportunities to have these conversations and unpack it and make it available for everyone to learn from. So, kudos to Two Feathers for doing a great job getting us all together here, and it was a good way to spend the evening. So thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. And then Damon, can you please share with us what you want to leave with us with tonight?
Yeah, same with what Charlie said. Thank you guys for putting this on, and I appreciate all of you taking the time. I learned a lot, and I appreciate just being able to share this space because, like Charlie says, there's not a lot of spaces like this, and it needs to be a priority. And in order for our communities to heal, in order for our communities to progress forward, is that this really needs to be a priority. Restorative justice needs to be a priority. That's true Indigenous justice, is how do we restore our relatives, how do we integrate them back into the community, the men who have caused harm, because there's a lot of men who are in prison, there's a lot of men who are in treatment right now who have caused harm, and like, how are we gonna, like, because like we're all doing good work and we're all navigating through some stuff, but there's a lot of relatives out there who are struggling. That's how we have to look at it, is we have to look to the men who have caused harm and we got to figure it out. That's what we did. We didn't believe in throwing people away. And I know that's like, I don't have all the answers for that, but that's what we did though. And that's why we have these conversations, because it starts creating the questions in everyone's individual community of, okay, how do we create restorative justice? How do we have these conversations? Because everyone's different, and my only reason I started having these conversations is because I went through 3 white therapists who couldn't help me with my trauma. So what I did was I started hosting spaces in all the communities I would go do basketball camps in. And that's where I started creating my community. It was like, I just spend time with men and let them know, like, just because I've had success as an athlete or whatever, like, I'm here for you, like with you, just right here, So I think that's it. is it doesn't matter where you're at in this journey, start somewhere. You know what I mean? And bring people along with you. That's a big, big thing. Bring people along, because you might not feel like you have the power, you might not feel like you're capable, but when you do, that's how you start stepping into your power and your purpose. Because you might just go to your friend's house and grab that one guy, that one man out of bed that might be struggling. That's how we got to look at it. We can't just take up some of our friends. You know, we have to look at how can we start creating this conversation on a bigger scale and start looking at like what is restorative justice for our communities. So that's what I want to leave people with, is like, let's challenge it. Let's challenge each other to have these conversations.
Thank you, Damon. Thank you, Metot. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Bubba, being behind the scenes, helping us out. It's really important, great conversation tonight. And just want to remind everybody that this is kind of the start of our teen dating violence awareness month. We're going to be doing some activities around that. And we're hoping this conversation can prevent violence going forward, especially with teen dating violence, as we're recognizing that in the month of February. Also, hopefully pretty quickly, this panel will be up on the Two Feathers YouTube page. So it'll be there to watch, rewatch, share out. And I just want to thank everybody and thank Two Feathers for being here and supporting this talk. And let's just all keep putting in the work and keep doing what we do and keep improving, keep getting better every day. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate y'all.
Thank you, guys.